This is Signal and Noise, bringing clarity to data, tech, and AI.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Signal and Noise. I'm Brett House, joined by my co-host, Rio Longacre. And today we have a phenomenal guest, Scott McKinley, the founder and CEO of Truthset, and someone that's spent 25 plus years. I don't think we're counting up to 30, right, Scott? Because I stopped counting at 25. I know that. In digital advertising, identity, data strategy, analytics. You and I crossed paths briefly at Nielsen, although I was there for about 5 years. You were there for what, 8 years?
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep.
And then you've been now on this entrepreneurial streak. You founded Ideafy, you sold that and exited that business, and now you founded Truthset. And for those that don't know, Truthset's a really interesting company. Scott is worked with one of my old Newstar executives, Greg Galletta, that was behind One ID, which was sort of our machine learning based identity resolution solution. And Scott is a former Olympic cyclist, which I like to say. I know I've mentioned that to you a couple of times because I'm a cyclist, but I'm more of a weekend warrior. You were a professional athlete. So is Greg Galletta. But welcome to the show, Scott. Thrilled to have you. I know we're trying to connect paths and impossible, but 15 meetings a day is a lot, and we ended up not connecting. But would love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and tell everybody a little bit about you, and if I missed anything in your background.
Thanks, Brett, and thanks, Rio, for having me on. This should be a fun conversation. It's funny about the 25 years thing. I think everybody just cuts it off at 25 because anything older than that, like it ages you into the Methuselah
into obsolescence.
I mean, what's scary about that? My first toe in the water in digital was in 1997, the year after I retired from bike racing. I had a partner. We taught ourselves how to code, and we were building websites for companies. And during that year, I said,
"That's big business back then, right?"
I said, I looked at my partner one time. I said, I think we missed it. I think we're a little too late." The internet in 1997, but that's how it started. And then ironically, this is a funny story, but if we got time, we'll tell it. I needed a job, like a real job, because I got married. My wife got pregnant. We realized,
that'll force you to get a real job fast, huh?
Yeah. It makes you do things, and you figure
you have a mortgage.
Yeah.
And I picked up a freelance gig with Cox Enterprises, which Cox at the time.
Is that Cox Communications?
Same. Well, Enterprise is the overall company. Communications is one of them. They had done this thing just about 6 months earlier where they said, the internet's here, so we're going to treat this like another medium. Cox, that's what we do. Cox started in newspapers in the 1800s.
Literally way back, yeah. And then they have radio stations. They have
this is what they
media.
From their perspective. This is no big deal. It's another medium. What we do since the 1860s, when they bought up a bunch of newspapers in the Midwest, that was great. They built that up. They created the first, big sort of aggregated newspaper empire. And then what was next? Radio came along. What did they do? Cox Radio is still huge. So they dominated radio. They have tons of stations across the country still. And it was television.
Haven't they spun off the radio stations? I think they're just in like an MVPD, a cable company now.
I don't know. I don't follow what they've done yet. But the point is, every time a new medium from radio, newspapers, radio, television, and cable, this is cool. They would allocate funds, very smart. They would try to get as much leverage off their existing properties as they could to support the new media empire that they were going to build, which they invariably did. And so when the internet came along, they're like, we're just going to allocate $100 million to new media. And they call it Cox Interactive Media. And again, Peter Winter was hired to run it. He's a really good guy. But, this was a different animal. This was the animal that was going to eat all the other animals, basically.
Yeah. So their transformation playbook didn't quite apply to the new internet, right? Because we've heard of a similar story from Jessica Hogue, who is the chief data officer at Hearst, and she talks about this continuation of sort of transformation and reinvention based on new media over a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
But you're suggesting that it didn't apply quite as easily as they thought.
The best example The best example was, what supports newspapers? Classifieds. Classifieds were the workhorse.
Oh, Craigslist killed that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in San Francisco. I was in San Francisco. They were down in Atlanta, and Craigslist showed up, and they're like, Scott, what's going on with this Craigslist thing? Is it a joke? Is right? What? We don't have to worry about this. And I was like, oh yeah, you have to worry about this.
They're coming for your revenue.
40% of your revenue is gone. Like just snap your fingers, right? I mean,
that's right. That's what happened. And when you stand back and look at it, Craigslist and the rest of the online classifieds players, like there was classifieds.com, there were some other ones, eBay, basically used to be kind of like a classifieds at the start.
Yeah.
They turned Craigslist turned a $24 billion industry into a $2 billion industry. Like the whole thing compressed.
Yeah. And like overnight, like in terms of the history of Cox, like this was a drop in their history's sort of ocean. Right. Timeline,
but
Craigslist made it initially it was zero for them, and they slowly built up into a small business with the same shitty website. I just thought that was fascinating. But you're right, it gutted the industry.
It shrunk it. It took the whole pie and shrunk it. It wasn't like they were going to eat the pie and take it away from Cox. They shrunk it. So no matter what you did, like that opportunity is gone. And they made investments in classifieds.com, cars.com, and a bunch of other like sort of new media diversification classified strategies. None of them really, when you shrink a market, by the way, we'll get to this probably, but kind of the same thing's happening with Nielsen. Nielsen's been running on a $2 billion TAM, which is the linear addressable market, which they measure, obviously, the linear television market. And that's just going to kind of go away. That one might not shrink. It might, but it just gets eaten alive by a new set of technologies that you can't migrate to at all.
Yeah,
well, Scott, people don't realize this. People don't realize this about publishing. It's actually half the size it was. Like to your point, in 2000, you look at today, like the whole publishing industry, like the overall revenue is quite literally half the size, despite the economy like probably more than doubling over that time.
Yeah.
So it's remarkable the precipitous and ongoing drop and how it is. And it's wild. But just Scott, the reason why we're excited to have you on here is like there's been a lot of talk about CTV. We had some great discussions at Possible about that with your extensive experience in this industry and media. And I think really the key tension that the whole advertising business is built on, this enormous confidence that we have, right? When you look at precision advertising, targeting, to do that, you need addressability, you need audience quality, you need, we're in the age of outcomes after all. You need identity graphs. Last couple of years, entered clean rooms, and now AI, right? AI-driven optimization and targeting. But I think under that's this basic question, right? Like, are the signals underneath any good? And I guess what you're saying is a lot of times the answer is no, and I don't disagree. And like, if that's the case, what does like modern marketing infrastructure really look like? And is there a more sophisticated way to move bad data through this, or good data through the system faster to get to those better targeting and better outcomes we're looking at? I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
Totally.
Do you want to get into it?
Yeah. You've been arguing about this data quality problem for quite a few years. Ever since I think you left Nielsen, probably before that. And I remember a lot of the conversation, especially at Newstar, we were preparing for signal loss, so it was cookie deprecation, and all of us spent countless cycles trying to solve, because our clients were saying, what's going to happen to this house of cards? Is it a house of cards that we've built?
Yeah.
What have you seen across the companies that you've run, and then obviously Truthset, that's convinced you that we're really unreliable data is kind of at the core of the problem, and it continues to be a problem?
Yeah. So that is the genesis of the company. One of my roles at Nielsen was to do diligence on potential acquisitions. So I had a little team, and we would go look at what they're doing, and invariably, probably more often than not, they were obviously massively exaggerating their capabilities and stuff like that. But every time we got into the weeds, we would look at the data sources of the data they're producing, or the methods they were using to assemble data for things like targeting or whatever the thing might be. And I was just horrified every single time. Like, I cannot believe that we've built this, multi-billion-dollar technological infrastructure that runs on really low octane fuel. It's just a great analogy. And I actually wanted to do this at Nielsen. I felt like the linear TV market was obviously aging out. It's gonna go away almost completely. It's all gonna go to addressable, and addressable, kind of like that conversation we had about classifieds. Addressable CTV is the people who measure the way you measure addressable CTV is never going to enjoy the same economics that Nielsen enjoyed for measuring linear television.
Yep.
Because it was the M word. It was the only place you went. It was the currency. Okay, it had some governance with
The
MRC,
accreditation, right?
Yep.
but it was the way that buyers and sellers agreed to size an audience on television, and it was very helpful. The people rag on Nielsen. I feel I was there when we tried to make a transformation, and we failed for a bunch of reasons that aren't entirely rational. I can explain those to you actually. But where was I going with this? What was it? Something I lost my time.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, but we were talking about Nielsen and measurement, but interject really quickly for the audience. So, Nielsen's really providing a measurement currency, so we can evaluate like how many households within a specific group are actually seeing a specific ad that's running in a program during a specific day part. So, I mean, not everyone who's listening probably understands how ads are bought, right? So I think that'd be a good thing maybe to dig into a little bit. And then we can maybe even go into CTV, because I think that's a really cool discussion about how data works there and targeting and inventory.
So picture the 50s, right? Whenever it was, when television starts getting mainstream and all these families are crowding around the console TV in the shag living room with the wood panel, and they're watching the $64,000 Question or ABC News. And think about those days. So all the marketers are seeing this happen, the big CPGs, and they're thinking, how do I get these audiences? But there's no way to size them. So what happens? They all make primary research. They brag about how big their audiences are, and nobody believes them. It's a lot like programmatic looks today. And even CTV, like nobody really knows how big these things are. Nobody knows how many humans are seeing all these device IDs that are being bought and sold and traded. Nobody knows how many bots. And so when Nielsen came along, so there was chaos in the 50s because the audiences were clearly watching television. It was an incredible new medium where a brand had an opportunity to tell a sight, sound, and story, 30-second vignette of the brand and how this is going to help your lives. It was a gorgeous. And what happened? This is facts. When Nielsen, it took them 15 years to build a rating system. They never said it was going to be perfect. It was always an estimate. But when that system got asserted in the market to give buyers and sellers at least a directional view of how big these audiences were, the friction got pulled out of that market, and that market started to grow like crazy. And it was literally, you can absolutely credit Nielsen for the linear television market becoming a $70 billion market in very, very quickly. And
a really important part about removing that friction point, right? To allow the economics and for people to have the confidence to actually make the purchases based on real.
Well, the buyer would know, would be able to say, we know we're buying like an advertisement in front of the specific audience, right? You can understand the value of it. You can think about how much you want to spend on it.
The word we're circling here, the buyer has the confidence in buying. Is trust. The word is trust. When there's trust in markets, when there's trust between buyers and sellers, when there's trust between two humans, life is easier. Things go better. You can look at a bar chart of the top 100 countries in the world, and you can map their GDP per person against levels of corruption in the country, and it is exactly linear. Like India, huge population, super low GDP per person, highest corruption rates in the world. I mean, it's so you can
barely functioning legal system, right? Yeah,
everything. Trust removes friction. Lack of trust, it's all friction. And I would argue that right now in the digital space, we're in a lack of trust world, right? Nobody really knows.
Nielsen was selling trust, right? I mean, that's really what they're selling with their model. They weren't saying it was perfect, but this is right.
Yeah, 100%. And I think with especially with the open internet, right? The walled gardens, which a lot of brands are flocking to, there is, I think, a level of trust because they can connect sort of an engagement action with some sort of point of sale.
And they can show attribution.
They can show attribution. Whereas the open internet, I mean, you mentioned it earlier, you sort of alluded to it. We've had a ton of conversations with Dr. Fu and Mark Zagorski at Double Verify around a lot of the slop and unverified reach. There's a big promise for reach, which is what linear television was promising. it's not really proving out. We're realizing that there's actually more inventory being promised than actually exists, right, in the ecosystem. You're promising reach, but it's not all real reach, and that's problematic.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why measurement is so important is because of that story we just told. I mean, measurement itself was the thing for linear TV that allowed the market to establish some trust between buyers and sellers and grow, right? And I think if we want to be, there's two ways to look at the current situation. You can look at it very, very negatively and say how bad it sucks and how much bots and fraud and everything else is flowing through the system. Or you can say, that's okay. We're just behind the curve. We're just catching up. Eventually we'll have measurement. Things will run, the market will grow. There'll be trust
Yeah.
from buyers and sellers. That's what happened. So my assertion, just coming back to the Nielsen thing and and Truthset, I thought, well, if Nielsen, because we kept buying companies and then messing them up. And I realized
Yeah.
this is not the way to transform because,
I
Nielsen,
was part of one of those companies.
Nielsen takes
Exelate.
over. Right.
Exelate, Nielsen Marketing Cloud. And then I had people, I had one story where, oh my God, I don't even know, can I tell this? I guess we're an independent podcast, but where I had people, because we were trying to launch a business unit with Mark Zagorski and Damian Gabrowski.
Yep.
You knew that whole play, right? We brought in some of Matt Krepsik's MTA solutions into Mimmin, sort of commercializing those. But there was a lot of pushback organizationally around launching this very successful, high growth post-acquisition sort of marketing cloud, which was sort of next generation from Nielsen's perspective. And so they would have people like spy on our organization to ensure that we were, kind of running by the playbook that they
That's
instituted.
funny.
So I thought that.
So
that
they're
was
worried
a
you
little
were
weird.
you're somehow gonna sabotage.
Yeah,
or
like people would
undercut their-
shadow you, to make sure that you weren't going out making bold statements about ad tech, martech, et cetera, that were going to
Yeah.
upset. And Scott, you probably ran into some of this, and you have your own, right?
Well,
Because you
the truth is, I wrote the strategy for the acquisition of Exelate. I was the architect, but it's coming out of a a Mexico offsite where I was trying to buy two MTA companies, either
okay,
Convertform or Odometry,
uh-huh,
and we could, and they both got acquired like within 24 hours.
yeah,
AOL bought Converter for 107 million. And then Google bought Odometry, and so that and Hasker said to me, "Well, what do we do?" And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm like, what is MTA? It is a database that can collect, or a data infrastructure that can collect exposure and transaction data, and it's a set of analytics on top. And I said, we've
Yep.
already learned at Nielsen that our analytics are probably better than the analytics of these little companies. That's what we do is analytics. Like we do media analytics. Like we should be able to do the analytics part. In that case, all we really need is a DMP. So that was what started that. Okay, great. Let's go buy
the data management platform, yeah,
a DMP. But my strategy for the thing, which is what got it done, was a plan to essentially use the DMP to platform Nielsen's data, right? Like my vision for the thing was, which I sold
Yep.
up. My vision wasn't let's let Exlate keep doing what they're doing. My vision was, holy smokes, Nielsen has global media exposure data, global, and has global buy data with the RMS retail measurement systems. Let's bring together, we were trying to bring together what we called watch and buy. You're connecting exposures to transactions for a long time, but there was so much friction. To me, this was the thing that was going to bring watch and buy data together, and then we would move.
Yeah.
It was great,
for those who don't know, a DMP, a data management platform. I mean, Brett, you've described it as a cookie farm. It's collecting cookie data, right? So, like combining that with the other signals Nielsen had. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. But I can see why there'd be a sound strategy.
Well, and there was kind of a breakdown with household versus persons level data. Can you talk about that a little bit, right? Just in terms of how do you actually fuse those, right? Because a lot of the Catalina solutions, the buy solutions, were all at the household level. The television data and even digital ad ratings was still at a household level, and you're trying to get down to a person's level.
It's even back with when it was with linear, right? But I haven't gotten to CTV yet, so I mean, it sounds like that was an issue even back then with the Nielsen data, right?
Well, sticking with the Exelate story, when we evaluated Exelate, I said, amazing pipes, amazing connectivity, there's so much bleeding edge technology in this data management platform, which is exactly what Nielsen needed. But, and I really actually dismissed all the cookie data that was in there. They had no sense of identity, to your point. They had no sense of a person ID or a household ID. They just treated a cookie as this must be a person. How do we classify it and sell it? That was, and I was,
You should have seen how they profiled me. I think I was a single female living alone in New York City when I ran my profile analysis. I'm like, they've got me completely wrong.
but you gotta,
Right? Which,
we've got to digress for 1 second here to not throw all these companies completely into the bus, because they, the cookies were reliable for a long time. Like device IDs were very reliable for a long freaking time. Retargeting is still reliable. So, and then you can't blame them if their buyers are saying, I want scale over accuracy. Like, hey, Mark, and all you guys over there at Exelate, when you have a chance to give me 100 million cookies that might be something versus 20 million that are something, I want the 100 million. I want the 100 million. I want the 100 million. So, it's, when I looked at it, I was like, I don't want any of that data. Like Nielsen is about truth. We're going to use this to tell the truth about what's happening. We try to migrate that into a person level idea and a household level idea, like you said. There was even budget that I argued for. I said, I don't want to acquire this company unless there's X million dollars set aside to build an identity graph to put in it. Because to your point, Brett, there was no sense of person or household, which was I could see was absolutely going to be needed to be competitive and dominant, even just in measurement, going forward. So that was, but the story here that's really relevant is like, this starts to explain why the internet quickly became such a mess. I wouldn't even call it signal and noise. I'd call it static. I mean, it's like, there's no value to it. Like it's just does, like right now there are 20 billion hexadecimal values floating around in these buying systems, these representing devices, which is supposed to represent people, supposedly. This is not even signal and noise. This is static. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Noise, I would characterize static as you don't even know if it's real or not. Noise is, okay, it represents something, but we really have no idea what it represents. And signal is, it's something that probably likely maybe represents a human being that's going to, have a kid and a wallet and a car and a trip they got to take. So you really want the signal. And it's like, if you look at, so look at the 20 years of development, everybody built these either noise machines or noise processing machines, one or the other, right? Like you just had to like if you were on the buy side, if you were on like I need to create audiences to sell, I'm going to create noise. They just spat out noise, and then the buy side would buy all the noise and either just cover their eyes and hold their nose and go on their merry way.
Noise kind of sort of behind the segmentation scheme.
Yeah, and if the CPMs are low enough, to your point, like scale is sometimes, there's little precision, but we have scale anyway. It doesn't even matter, right?
Yeah. So, well, Rio,
you saw a lot of that.
Rio, you're tapping into yet another endemic problem with the whole system, which is the biggest buyers, the biggest CPGs, they were and still do use MMMs. Like they tried all these little experiments. They tried NCS with Nielsen. They tried Circana. But they lost confidence in all of these, very precise measurement systems, and they ended up going back to Mix. What does Mix do? Mix just looks at how heavy was I here over what period of time, and how can I see my sales go up and down relative to that media weight?
To fuel like strategic decisions around budget allocation at the channel level and at a very high sort of aggregate level, right?
Totally. So, and their system is not sensitive. MMMs are not sensitive. And what they do is they say, oh, we noticed when we did a time series regression, when we look back over the last year, we heavied up in Phoenix and sales went up. So I'm going to credit the sales with that heavy up. And that's great. Except that what that does is it creates a KPI for efficiency. At that point, if those are your calculations, all I want to do is drive down the cost of all that media weight, right? And that's what they do. I don't care if it's good or bad. I just want weight, right?
I just need to spend my budget too. I mean, that's always part of it, right? It's funny. I work with a couple of clients now, and I've seen the MMM get created, right, by the strategy team, and then it goes over to a totally different team who's actually going to buy the media, and they work with the agency to create the plan based on that. And then, there's a lag, the translation of that into actual like tactics and where the buys happen, which platforms, it's to say it's not a science is an understatement, in my opinion.
Well, the activation from the insights in that 6-month window is maybe less scientific than it needs to be. It's not directly tied.
Well,
to
I'm talking just translating the MMM into an actual media buying plan. Forget about even like looking at the outcomes and tying back the measurement to like how you reconfigure and adjust that. I mean, I think that's a whole nother thing.
The point is that if that's the way you're measuring, and the resulting outcomes of the resulting action items of what you should do to make it better is push down media cost. This is bad. This literally created a lot of the mess we're in right now, because what that does, it motivates all your partners to optimize for scale with no caring about quality whatsoever. It also grinds down the publishers, which actually works against you as a major brand, because you need those publishers to survive, to attract people who you can rent their time and attention for 7 seconds.
Yeah, they need to be able to effectively monetize their properties. And if you're going against that, you're really going against the open web, and then you're forced into these walled garden type of ecosystems to do all your buying, right?
In my first my second startup, which was a sort of an advanced mixed modeling company, meant to be digitally oriented, meant to try to solve this problem. We had a client, it's a top 5 CPG. I shouldn't say who it was, but we did a study for them. There was barely even any video inventory. This is probably 2005, maybe 2006. I mean, there was some inventory coming online. Brightroll was there. All the rich media stuff is there. It was some video online. And so they wanted to know, how do I compare the ROI, the ROAS, the effectiveness, efficiency of online video versus television versus print. These are the 3 things that they bought. So we did this very robust, and I would say accurate study. One fault of mine is I always tell the truth, even if it's not in my own interest. So sometimes but we told them
there's no obfuscation. There's no obfuscation with Scott McKinley, right?
None, even if it puts me out of a job. And we showed them the online video at that time was very performant. It was right up there. It might have been better at the time because the CPMs were low and everything else. And they said publicly, we're going to allocate 20% of our budget, which was over $1 billion, to online video. They actually did a press release on this, bragging about how modern they were. First of all, there was not that much inventory on the whole internet. They could have bought out the whole internet for $2 billion, not $200 million.
Right.
But they had a second stipulation. This is back to the MMM driving efficiencies instead of effectiveness. They said, but we have a rule for it. I'm like, what's the rule? They're like, we're telling everybody we're never going to spend more than a $3 CPM for this video. And I was like, dude.
So we're gonna spend all this money and we're gonna be at a super low rate. I mean, he could have bought all the inventory 50 times. That's just crazy.
But it's the point was, and then at the time I talked to Todd Saserdati, who ran Brightroll. It turned out this is the same. We shared this client, and he named it. I'm still not gonna name who it is. And he said, Scott, he says, your story is so right. He said, I would tell them, I can't tell you guys that we're delivering a single video to a single actual human being because of this low price point. Like hey,
you nailed the hit on that. This was how many years ago was this?
This is 2005. So whatever that is.
Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed. We hear this problem all the time, right?
I said,
you're reaching CTV audiences on a mobile phone. Aren't real.
What's worse than that? It's like, hey, do your kids have Napster? If you scroll, if it loads really slowly, you scroll to the bottom, there's a bunch of stuff down there. Those are pixels.
Lots of video.
Back with thousands of video calls. That's where your ads are getting delivered, right? That literally not to people.
Yeah.
But the whole point of this whole story, I think it's all relevant. It's that the industry evolved in a direction to optimize for scale, no sense of accuracy. Everyone assumed that the early performance of cookies was just going to carry through. No one paid attention as this stuff degraded. Everyone turned a blind eye when all these fraudsters, whether they did it deliberately or just through evolution, started selling things that were not humans. They were not humans. These are just not people. And then a funny thing happened in around 2010. So Facebook showed up, right? Mark Zagorski never sat down and said, I'm brilliant. I'm going to predict that if I can get somebody to give me their email address, I can build a media empire. He didn't say that. He said, I'm going to build a book face thing, Facebook thing, so that we can all laugh at each other. But in order to do that, you have to identify yourself. And that accidental hack is what allowed him to build the most powerful media empire the planet's ever seen.
Mark Zuckerberg, yeah.
By requiring people to authenticate, to say, here's my email address. Because what that did is it gave Facebook control of the consumer. It gave Facebook a durable person level identity that's owned by the person, that's not likely to change or be traded, that they can
Yep.
hook data to. And that's the playbook. I mean, the punchline of this whole conversation is, why is, especially CTV and these big networks, why are they not just looking at the walled gardens and saying, that's the playbook that wins? The playbook that
Yeah.
wins, Google, Facebook,
Yeah.
Netflix,
Authentication with
Amazon.
persistent
Well,
identifiers, right? Which is in
authentication is the freaking hack. Like, get it through your heads. If you
yeah.
right now, and I did a study like this at Nielsen privately, the average CPM at the time for an unauthenticated cookie-based audience was like $1.50 or $1 or something like that, maybe
Yeah.
even lower.
Kind of like a
That's
remnant inventory CPM.
that's the whole open internet average. The average inventory for that same CPM for that same audience on Facebook or on Google, in a place where there was authentication, was $8 or $10, and that's
Yeah.
like the
It's almost
difference.
10x.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
difference. And so everyone's like, I can't believe they ran away with their 70 cents of every media dollar goes to it's because they have human audiences that actually can see the ads and maybe respond. Like everything
And
else
it's no wonder why they actually convert, right? And you can actually prove outcomes and it's wild.
100%.
So, but
yeah.
Scott, let's turn to CTV. I mean, this is such, it's growing like crazy. I think, Brett, we covered this a couple episodes, 18% this year, continues to. So it'd be good for the audience maybe to hear about how is inventory actually bought? Obviously, if you go to the walled gardens, you go to like Amazon to buy their owned and operated, Amazon Prime Video, you're logged in, they know who you are. But a lot of CTV inventory is actually bought through, it's debatable, is it open web or not? But you can go to the trade desk. You can even buy like audience extensions, offsite inventory in Amazon DSP for Netflix or other places. Let's talk about like, how is that bought? Because you have the inventory itself, right? Then you have the data, the audience, super important. And maybe we can walk through like, how is that bought, and like what is the role of data, and how is it important to have good data, and how is that data a lot of times not any good? Because I think that's part of your thesis, right?
Well, when CTV started to become real and everyone could see this is where things were going, despite a lot of people, poo-pooing it, YouTube's not a TV channel. What? I mean, remember, no one ever watched YouTube on their TVs, right? Like that's almost
they
the
do
moment.
now.
Yeah, you still hear denials around that today. I've heard denials with conversations with pretty senior execs, and I'm like, it is television. I don't care what you call it. It's still, people are watching 60% of all television consumptions in YouTube on the big screen.
100%. And it's, this is one of the problems that traditional TV networks have, is they think their content is just extra precious because it costs a lot of money and attracts a lot of viewership. And I've had this argument forever about, the idea of attention and outcomes and the value of media. You can't, just because you spent, $1 billion making Landman and a lot of people tune in and watch it, it doesn't mean that
I love that
ad,
show, by the way.
you put a pharma ad in front of me put it in front of me 25 times in 2 hours for a condition that I will never have. That ad, despite you getting the media right and having great creative, is not going to perform. And I could be later that night on freaking Instagram, lazily, boringly doom scrolling, and I see a black and white, shitty, poorly produced creative for a mountain bike that I happen to be in the market for. I'm going to stop, and I might even click. Like, so you can't, they have this preciousness, which you understand, they're defending their legacy. Like, what we do is make great stories that people like to watch.
Long form Hollywood content. It's a Hollywood economy, right?
Yeah. But the point is, you guys are missing the data piece, right? You're getting crushed by Instagram in a terrible media environment because they know who I am every single time I log on.
With shitty ads that,
right.
Yeah.
But they're going to work because the three-legged stool of advertising is the audience. Like, I made a product for somebody, it's an audience. Then the next one is the creative. What am I going to say to that audience? And the third one is the media. Where can I rent 7 seconds or 30 seconds of attention from a human being that is that person and tell my story to that person? That's the, you pull out any one of those legs, the stool doesn't stand up, right? In the old days, there was no concept of audience. It was all mass targeting. Like, every product that got advertised on television was to a mom who could walk down the street and buy the Swiffer mop in her corner store or her Sears or her JCPenney. And all that's changed. Like, there was only Asian gender. That's what Nielsen could report on because it was hard to go beyond that. That's how it ran. So all the emphasis went to creative. This is where we got the Mad Men golden hour, the golden era of advertising.
Yep.
And it went to the medium, this incredible medium of television. And that's all you needed. And it was amazing. Now it's all different. And I think people have forgotten that just how important it is to get audience data right. There's a ton of audience data, but it's more static than it is signal or noise.
Yeah, and you guys have said that 40% of every dollar spent on CTV programmatic is wasted because of bad data.
It's more
And I
than
think
that.
you calculated it was over 7 billion, 7.4, something like that, in lost CTV dollars. So clearly there's some friction in this ecosystem. What's the
let's go
solve for
back-
that? How do we?
Yeah, it comes back to Rio's question, like how do people buy CTV? And when CTV started to get maturity and everyone it started to treat it like a real channel, there was a question in the industry, which was, well, what kind of a channel is it? Is it its own channel? Is it going to behave like linear TV? Are we going to buy it, sell it, and measure it like we do linear TV? Are we going to buy it, sell it, and measure it like we do programmatic? And it went the programmatic route, which I'm going to say was the dangerous path.
What percent is biddable today, Scott, of CTV? It's like is the majority biddable?
I don't know for sure, but I would bet that
I think it probably is.
a lot of it is the majority is biddable. But here's the problem. Okay, when it went to the programmatic route, everyone was like, okay, well, how do we get the volume that we need? How do we create a transactable thing that we can buy and sell that represents a television that's supposed to be hanging in somebody's home, right? And the thing is, so here's the supply chain of identity and data for CTV. It starts with a CTV. There is a CTV ID. It's set by the OEMs. It sits on the device. You can't see it. You can't get it.
It's a device ID. Correct.
It's a device ID for the CTV, but it's not
independent of IP address. This is device specific.
The next one goes it's hard to get the CTV ID. It has to be, I think, acquired only from the OEMs who set it. I don't think you can see it, and so you won't have the scale ever. Even if you got all the OEMs or half the OEMs to give you half the CTV IDs, you would have big gaps in your viable inventory, and that's never sufficient.
Will they share those with the ACR aggregators as well, or is it, because I know that a big part of the screens themselves, they don't really make money on them, or I think sometimes they lose money on them, right? And they're making their money through selling or syndicating all the data they're collecting, right? So the device ID, that'd be one of the signals they're collecting and they're probably making money off of, right? The manufacturers.
Yeah, but it's not prevalent and scaled enough to be the tradable identity. The tradable identity is IP address. So what you do is you try to connect a CTV with an IP address. Right now, both those things are on the device at the same time. If you can get the CTV or you get whatever, you end up with the IP address. That's the thing that people are buying and selling. The IP address then gets connected to a cookie or a email address or a postal address through a variety of.
And those connections kind of suck, right? Like IP address to postal is super low percentage.
So we did
IP is very broad, right? It could be several houses, it could be a block. Or if you're through VPN, it could be another state entirely or another country.
So we did a commission study last year by CIM, the industry body, which is doing really great.
The Coalition of Innovation Media Measurement, right?
That's Coalition for Innovation in Media Measurement. Nice job, Brett.
Oh, for innovation. Yep.
Very unwieldy to say all the letters. That was meant to shine a light on this and understand how accurate or inaccurate are the linkages between IP addresses and the other things that you use to build audiences. Like IP address doesn't have a demographic. You need to understand who's in the home, so you need to link it to something where there is a demographic, like an email address or a postal, or you could do a cookie or whatever. We found that the average among a whole pile of well-known providers of this linkage data, the average was, I believe, 13% accurate when linking a IP address
to home address, right? To household
and then
address.
16% for postal address, I believe, is what the stat was. And so
Yeah.
you guys stand back. You're trying to support and embrace and leverage this new media channel that promises everything: full sight, sound, and motion delivery of televisions, of brand stories into somebody's living room. This is incredible, much more
automated
measurable.
ad delivery that's switchable, and you can adjust the creative. You can do all sorts of things.
Incredible.
flexibly.
Except
that you couldn't do in linear.
except that your guess about who those people are behind the screen is 87% wrong to start. Like that's
It's
how
wrong almost not some of the time, almost all the time.
it's wrong almost all the time. It's worse than cookies were for sure. Probably worse than cookies are today. It's just like we jumped from the frying pan, cookies that didn't work, into the fire, IP addresses. They're not going to work. Now, I will say, I just got to throw in here that averages are always very dangerous because they smooth everything out. And the assumption is that everybody is 13%. No, there are extremely accurate pools of IP linkage data. Roku, for example, they see the IP. Comcast, they're the ones who set the IP address, right? So there are pockets of sources of purely deterministic, no probabilistic guesses about the connection of a given IP address and the devices connected to it, to the home and the people and everything else. But the goal really here, go ahead.
Yeah, but that supports either direct to publisher or direct to Roku type provider purchase, but it doesn't support a cross ecosystem purchase from a media buying perspective.
Yeah, it's
you
a
would
mess.
do with linear, right?
Exactly. It's a mess. And there's another problem happening at the same time. Like we're always out there advocating, just like we talked about earlier, hey TV, just use example again, like the ability for, Paramount to monetize 30 seconds of my time and attention during Landman, which is a show I really, really love. I mean, if they don't, if I'm authenticated and they ignore my authentication, let's come back to that for a second. And instead just take my IP and put it into another bunch of IPs and sell it off to somebody because it's got the scale, I'm going to see an ad that's not relevant to me. So they are not going to get the yield from that inventory that they should get. Take that same program. Now they've licensed it to Amazon. Now they've licensed it to Netflix or now whatever. They have my identity. They're going to monetize it 20 times or higher better.
So these are all the other places where you can buy inventory, in other words, and like they may have bought that IP address that's supposedly linked to you, or like, and then so to your point, like people are buying these audiences that are supposedly like highly accurate, but they may not be.
Well, they aren't.
May not. I think you're saying they're not.
They are not.
But like, I want to help save linear traditional television. I think it's unhealthy for the walled gardens to control the narrative and the advertising around.
Wait, do you want to save traditional television, or you want to save the model that allowed for like broad reach across the entire ecosystem?
I want NBC and CBS and all these companies to survive. I think it's really healthy to have diversity. It's good for journalism.
Yes.
It's good for free speech. It's like
good for democracy. I mean,
it really is good for democracy. And that's like people think, really, we're not digging wells here in India, but it is good for democracy. Like you cannot have the cultural narrative be controlled by a couple of companies, right? And
we'll have it's like publisher balkanization, and is what it is, and you end up having all of these separate worlds that are completely corporatized and behind walled gardens.
Well, even New York Times, they've been like they struggled so much to monetize any of their inventory. They're now selling they make most of their money in crossword puzzles. I mean, everyone's talking about how they're doing well, and they are. Like, congrats to them. But the thing is, like, they're monetizing all these games. They found different models, right? I think it's almost like they've given up on selling ads to a certain extent. I don't know.
Yeah, and in their case, you also have just the tidal wave of really good user generated content. I mean, I'm sorry, very few people are going to sit and read an article in the New York Times. For every person that's going to sit and read,
how life has changed since we started, right?
For every human being that's going to read a physical newspaper or even go online and read a long form news story on New York Times, for every one person there are 1 million people happily scrolling away on TikTok and Instagram, right? So let's just face it. The consumption, the nature of media consumption has changed and will probably never. I sat down and tried to force myself to read a book the other day. I couldn't even read it.
I know. Scott, I was like, is this a problem with me, or is this a me problem?
So I was having dinner with a bunch.
How many pages do I have to get through till I get a dopamine hit? Damn it! Come on.
Well, this is not stimulating enough.
But people will listen. Those same people who will go to scroll TikTok, you're right, will not read a long form article. They will listen to a 2-hour podcast. I think so this is almost like the dumbbell effect where people prefer short form. I agree with you. It's harder. But I think there is a place for long form. But I just think the way people consume content has changed. And I think a lot of these like like you're watching Landman. I love Landman. There's a lot of shows I watch, and I watch them all the time right when they come out, right? But yeah, but I think that I haven't read it. I've actually had funny. I haven't. You speak of books. I haven't read a physical book in years. I bet I do read ebooks. So
Yeah.
I think
So
content
Signal and
consumption
Noise is
patterns have
like the
changed.
cliff notes for the MarTech, data tech, AI, right? We're like the dummy proof. Just listen to us. You don't have to read anything. But no, but so back to your point about saving what you said was sort of traditional television, or at least the model behind traditional television, which is sort of an open model that's supportive of all publishers that are within that medium. How do you see that? What are the next steps? How do you see that happening? Is
Well,
this a fool's errand?
if we keep going down this path of pretending that an IP address represents a certain kind of person, or I'll tell you what happened. Those companies will never get yield off their inventory because it won't perform, because it'll be poorly targeted. Okay.
Yep.
So the money's they will never get the yield. The next step will be the death knell, which is already starting, of traditional television, which is those companies will realize this, and in an effort to make revenue, they will start licensing their content to their competitors who can monetize it 20 times better. If they take half the take rate off of Landman shown on Prime with an ad tier, they're going to still make 5 times more than they would trying to monetize that themselves. That's the nature of it. So I think we are, if we continue down this path, we already hit the iceberg. It's just rearranging deck chairs. It's going to all end up in the gardens. And I think that's really, really unhealthy. You're already seeing the consolidation. Like it's crazy. The alternative is staring us right in the face, which is use that playbook, guys. Authenticate your users. Mandate it. I was told by somebody, it's funny. So we do serve some of these big TV folks who are doing really good things to try to make this transition. And someone senior told me, Scott, I ran that up the flagpole. Like, you told me you should have mandatory authentication wherever you can get it for these reasons. And he says, I agree. And he ran up the flagpole. He says, we're not going to do it. I said, why in the world? What's going to happen. He's like,
What'd they say?
They said it's a privacy compliance issue. We don't have the infrastructure to create, to manage
consent.
Yeah. And they're like,
that's a cop out.
That sounds like a cop out. Like a double opt-in process is not.
It's not I wouldn't say it's a cop out. I would say it's letting legal liability get in the way of existential survival. Like that's just a legal problem. You just got to, and a technology problem too. Just solve it. You don't just say
tools are out there, right? You can go to OneTrust if you just want to do cookie consent management, or if it's a bigger consent management play. They're consent management platforms. You can collect. You could have it stored in your CDP. I don't know. There are ways to do it.
Yeah, so maybe it was a little bit. I'm sure it was a little bit of a cop out. People just don't really want to change, and they're bummed out, and their careers are going to be over before this really hits. So who really?
In the legal department, like they want to prove that they're show they're valuable, right? So they like to say no to things a lot. So I don't know.
Do you think they do like the back of the napkin math and sort of think, well, hey, what percentage of our total audience reach, back to the audience reach topic, is willing to authenticate? And if it's a sub-segment, let's say 10, 20, 30%, we're going to lose all of this extensible reach that we are promising our advertisers. So, so then it's this downward spiral of like, well, then there's less revenue because we have less reach, right? So we're not going to go down that path. Is that part of the calculus?
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So let's go back for 1 second to newspapers and around this authentication.
We're going way back.
No. Okay. So I was only 10 years ago. I was at Ideafy, that company under ALC, which was a sub, and I went down and talked to about 1,000, a conglomerate that runs data for like 1,000 publishers, some very, very big ones that you definitely have heard of. And I made this authentication speech, and I basically said, I trotted out that stat that the monetization rate for the same audience in a cookie world versus an authenticated world is like 10x, really.
Yeah.
And they said to me, Scott, we hear what you're saying, but if we put an auth wall up, I said, don't put a paywall. You just want them to authenticate. That's the beginning.
Just ask them to give their email.
That's the beginning of success, and they said, if we put an auth wall up, we've calculated that we're going to lose 15% of our, get ready for this, page views.
Oh my God.
This is
Yeah,
like
page views. What
Well,
a
so-
solid metric that is.
No, but think about it. They were worried of 15%, not knowing this AI tsunami is going to hit them where they're going to lose 40. Like we're
Well,
talking to pubs and they lost 25, 30, 40% of all referral traffic's already gone.
also, I'm like, that's great because you're going to monetize the remaining 85% 10 times better than
Right, 10 times.
The outcome is still an order of magnitude higher than you're earning today, and you're going out of business, guys. So that's that mentality. Now coming back to so think about that. Coming back to CTV, their pushback was privacy. Maybe it was a cop out, maybe not. Even since then, this is about a year and a half ago when I had this conversation. They've started realizing this. Like I set my father-in-law up on Pluto the other day, and they were very aggressive and made it very easy to authenticate. Right, there was a good value proposition. So they're trying, but here's the other problem. The other problem is if I'm a streamer, a big program, a big TV network, and I've got my linear, I know that's dying out, that's bumming me out. I've got my streaming and a lot of it's authenticated. Most of it's authenticated. Maybe I have a fast property where I don't know if I want to, they should authenticate, but for some reason they're not.
Yep.
But the point is that like Paramount Plus or NBC Peacock, right? You are giving them your billing address, your email address, all these things, right? So there's a portion of that entire audience at a Paramount or an NBC or a WBD that is authenticated, right?
Yep.
You know what? They don't sell that as authenticated inventory because the buyers come along and they say, I want 100 of the things. And they're like, we have 20 of the things that are really, really accurate because we have authentication. Do you want those? They literally, the buyers are saying, I don't even care if 20% authenticated. I just want IP addresses for the whole 100 things that I want to buy.
So that's a buyer issue, right?
It
They're
is a
asking
buyer
for the
issue.
wrong thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you can't blame, like you got to be careful about blaming people who are doing things that look irrational or not in their best interest because it's coming down. It's the pyramid. There's the brands, there's the agencies, and the KPIs. We're still running on these stupid reach KPIs. Look, I was we have several CPG clients. I was at one of them the other day, and they told me that they've decided, this is a 100-year-old company. They realized actually that they have to stop applying the old calculus, everything, the economics of linear, what they did in linear, which they leveraged as a competitive advantage. They're so good at it. They were kept trying to use linear tools and tricks to move into addressable. And they finally realized these things don't play. They do nothing is the same. We need to literally break our models and create a whole new approach to use addressable, for a competitive advantage for marketing. And they said, we don't know how to do it. It doesn't work for us. We want scale, and it's really hard to get in CTV. It's the measurements, everything's messier. So that tells you how different linear and CTV are. And I want to close out this little topic with what streamers need to do is look at what the walled gardens are doing and say, that's the playbook. Authenticate your users, own your users. Stop outsourcing everything to third parties. Stop.
You're disintermediating yourselves.
Totally.
Right. By doing that.
But let's say this happens, like open web versus like logged in web. I think that's the term I heard thrown around a lot. So does open web just become a place for like not only unauthenticated, but low quality, undifferentiated traffic, right? Versus this like if publishers did this, right? If they had some kind of authentication, you're right, they could have up to 10 times higher CPM. That's a huge difference, right? But if they all leave, what happens to the open web then? I mean, like, does it still exist? Because you have the walled gardens, the logged in web. I mean, it sounds like open web just becomes, it's just a race to the bottom then, right?
It already is a race to the bottom. If you do the overlapping circles of where it's less, I think it's about 17. Okay. I think last time I checked, which was, I think Chris Kane at Jounce Media puts out a thing that kind of maps the different channels and stuff like that. But last time I checked, I think the unauthenticated open web was 17% and losing a couple points every single. There's nowhere that's going except down, right?
Yeah.
If you look at it, somebody just put out a stack rank of where the money is going into the big media properties, and there's a couple. So it's the big guys, right? It's obviously the Googles and all those guys are at the top. The only like open web things on there are like Pinterest, Snap. Because these are little gardens. These are little gardens. They're heavily authenticated, mostly authenticated. they're building audiences that are sustainable and durable, and they actually represent people. They're doing a much better job of acting like a walled garden than the open web is.
Yeah.
If you're a site that's just running on cookies or IPs, I mean, what are you doing? I mean, it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, and there's a big push towards, and we talked about this with Permitive, right? With Joe Root, right? And they're pushing towards just premium inventory, and to be premium, you need to have authenticated audiences, even if they're smaller volumes of audiences. They're
And direct
much
sell
more,
deals, like they're really sour and open exchange, right?
yeah,
Completely. They're saying
direct deals.
if you have the robust sell side signals, right, which include, Brett, all the things you just mentioned, the
Yep.
audience details, the contextual signals, all of that, right? I mean, you can command a premium, and you should be supporting these publishers as they work directly with brands. That was their thesis anyway.
Yeah, and how underutilized the data that they have, that publishers have, is in the advertising sort of bid stream and ecosystem. Once they push it through the DSP pipes, there's a narrowing of the pipes. All that rich consumer data, they own the audience, is not being utilized, and so it affects yields. To your point earlier about Scott, because it's not going to
Yeah.
perform because you're taking a subsegment of the
Right.
data that publishers already have, and yet they're some of them are still hesitating going
Well,
towards that.
but Scott, where do you
authenticated
see things going though? Just quick question. Like, so where do you do like with if this happens, if let's say, publishers are okay, we have to get authenticated audiences. We're gonna just force everyone to go through this path, even if we lose 2/3, doesn't matter. We're gonna be 10x on that 1/3. If that starts happening, like, does the way inventory is bought and sold maybe change? I mean, because again, Permutive's thesis was it'll be more direct sold instead of majority being programmatic and, like, say,
Yep.
most of that being biddable. You could have more direct sold deals. I mean, I granted PMPs you're still an auction, but like, does the format of these media, like the way media is bought and sold, change? And like, does this impact the way that you mentioned buyers? Does this change their behaviors, do you think?
I think that the trend for buyers who actually pay attention to what's happening and doing their best to assess value to different ways of buying in different channels, I think they will absolutely gravitate to where the inventory is trustworthy and credible. Okay, that's the
Yep.
first thing, and then
Yep.
that usually correlates with there's some kind of the chances of me reaching humans on that particular channel are much higher because they're authenticated. Like, I think that's what's
Yep.
that because it's just abundantly clear that throwing $1 into a DSP who tells you they're going to buy a bunch of CTV is you might get 3-5 cents of value out of that. Really, it's kind of that bad. I mean, on average. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think the authentication story is inevitable. I think either like even these publishers you're talking about, like the sort of race to the bottom, like if you're a publisher that produces actually good, you're not an MFA, you're not a made for advertising site, you're not a bullshit,
Yep.
recipe site that you've got to wait
Yeah.
in line
AI
down to.
AI generated
Like,
recipe site. Yeah.
lady, I don't want to hear where you were born. I want to see the recipe for the, it's an excuse to put in more ads. But I think that the programmers, content producers who produce good content can easily earn authentication and they don't realize it.
Yeah.
Like they can earn it. And if they can't, your stuff is so garbage. Sorry, you're gonna float around in the bottom and I don't know why people would ever buy your inventory. But I think that everybody should try harder to create that value exchange with the user that earns the right to authenticate and delivers a good quality experience. I'm a cyclist. I always watch the old cycling races, and there's one company out of Australia called Cycling News, which is the global source for
Yeah.
everything pro cycling. And to
Yep.
me, that was like the litmus test. I was like, during all this time when I'm realizing that authentication is the path forward for media, I was like, I cannot believe if they put an auth wall up and saying, hey, just we want to, collect your email address to serve you better and give you whatever it is, I would 100% do it. And
No
it took
brainer, yeah.
years. It took them years and years and years to do it. And finally they did it. So that's what
Yeah.
for things looking forward for the open internet and even television, anything that's not in a walled garden already, for those enterprises to hope to compete in the new media world, they must authenticate their users. There is no other path forward. That's it. That's it. And I think once as that increases, and I will say that again, the traditional TV networks are they've learned this and they're trying really hard to authenticate. The minute we get authenticated inventory in the non-walled garden media world, now I can buy scale now. And it doesn't really matter if you buy direct. The direct or intermediary buying strategies are really about like, how much scale do you want? Do I really
Yeah.
want to do 14 contracts for IOs and with 14? Sometimes you just want to buy it all that's available. That will work if what I can buy is authenticated. And
Yeah.
that's one thing that we're doing at Truthset. We're literally walking the walk around this whole subject. We're saying the internet is a mess. It's not good for anybody. No one knows what they're getting. No one knows how many people are behind these IDs. No one knows how much fraud. So we want to, Truthset's saying, our approach to this is, instead of starting with all this static, which might be some noise, you might be able to squeeze some signal out of, which is the state of things. Let's start with all the people. Let's recognize that there are 300 million adults, or whatever the number is. Let's do our best to understand those people. Let's build up from them. Let's build audiences of the 12 million women today who are actually pregnant. Let's try to start from certainty. Like, what does census say this audience is? Instead of like, hey, I'll sell you 6 million, left-handed soccer moms in Kansas City, a DNA that only has 1.2 million people in it. Like, that was the world. That's still the world
that's the probabilistic world, right? It's kind of it's like a model-based guesswork.
Right. So what we're saying is, look, do that if you want, but if you want people, like, marketing works when a message reaches a human being who's got kids, a wallet, a car, a commute, a trip they want to take, not a device.
And as an actual human being, right?
Yeah.
So let's start there. Let's allow a brand to build an audience with the certainty that these are the humans that I want to reach. And now let's push that out in the ecosystem. Ideally, doing one-to-one PII matches with different destinations to pull out that 20% of authenticated inventory, pull out another 18% here, 12% here, and slowly amass audiences that are big enough to justify a decent buy. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make it person-based, truly person-based. I think that digital and CTV should look like direct mail eventually, like eminently targetable, eminently measurable, like really, really certain. And also, prices are going to go up. This is a world we're moving to a world of scarcity. The 20 billion buyable IDs floating around, very few of which are actually humans, much less the right humans, is going to shrink. It's going to be a really, really good thing, except everyone's going to struggle about prices going up, because prices will go up.
It's interesting you say that, because that's been Dr. Fu. We have had him on this podcast a couple of times. That's always been his argument, is that you look at the amount of ad spend that's gone into digital, it's gone up by 10x or something like that, right? Over time. And the inventory hasn't grown that much, yet the CPMs continue to collapse, right? So there's just a lot of garbage inventory out there. If it's really because it is a marketplace, if anything, CPM should have gone way up, because you have more money chasing not that much more inventory. So that's a good point you make there.
Yeah. Well, and I love your point about the direct mail, and the digital is going to go the way of direct mail. I mean, in the sense of like the authentication and the one-to-one reach that you're getting with direct mail. Do we still have Scott on the line?
I think we may have lost him.
Well,
I'm back.
hey, for everybody that there we are. Back. He's back. A little bit of a delay. Well, I think we were just. Did you hear us? You heard us, I'm assuming. No, So Scott, this has been a great conversation. We're all a little bit over our next.
Do you want to do quick hits, or
should we do quick hits, or should we? We'll do some quick hits, and then we'll wrap up. So. This is where we'll just ask you a couple of quick questions. I got the first one. So what part of the identity ecosystem is most overdue for a reckoning?
A focus on the quality of these linkages, which is the connection of one ID to another. People completely misunderstand that even if I have a, quote, deterministic ID, someone gave me an email address, that's great. You can't do anything with that until you connect that email address to something else, to whatever it might be, to an IP address, right? And those linkages, everybody for some reason just assumes that those linkages are good. They're not good. Like the IP address linkage we talked about, 13 to 60% average accuracy. I mean, you're throwing away potentially 83, 82% of your dollars. So I think it's two answers. One is it's the linkages. Like, people don't understand that data moves through these hops between identity spaces, And each time you lose a lot of fidelity, you lose records, and nobody really pays attention to how important that is. The other part of the identity thing that I would highlight is what we've talked about this whole time, which is you need to authenticate your users. It's, we're not,
Yeah.
we're not 20 years ago where you were scared to handle PII. Like, you should do that, because look at the market caps of the other media companies who are doing that. It, they're worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, and they're not running into any legal issues,
No.
right? Usually.
Well, yeah.
To be
Well, if
fair.
they are, it's like a small potatoes relative to the the revenue they're generating from it, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, you
Google's
still
had
have to make,
fines for privacy, but like you look at how much money they're making, it's nothing.
yeah, and it's back to that conversation about that TV network. Like, would you rather just, I don't want to do it, and then go out of business, or like figure out how to do it, figure out how to handle the legal liability, the technical challenge, which, to your point, Rio, there are tons of tools that are built to do this. So that's what I'd say about identity.
Scott, what's a bigger problem and what's more corrosive to the system? Bad source data, bad modeling, or just perverse bad incentives?
Ooh, I mean, all three of those are kind of the same thing. I mean, they all work together. You have perverse incentives, which cause you to stretch your model to produce an outcome or a audience that you want. And
Yep.
then that turns into the first thing, which is bad audience data. So literally what you said unintentionally, it's a daisy chain. It's the perverse incentives that drive the misuse of technological tools, the modeling and et cetera, which produce data that's not actually accurate and reliable and won't produce a result that you expect.
So who's got the power to change to enforce standards to change this? Does it start with the
Ooh.
brands that are actually doing the media buying?
Well, you said two words that modify the answer a little bit. Yes, the brands are responsible for demanding transparency, clarity, all this, and they're starting to do it, right?
Yeah.
And it used to be that their agencies weren't so hot on that, because once they dialed in a model, finally they can survive. They don't want to change anything at all. They don't want to do
Yeah.
that. So, but all that's changing. I think the agencies are stepping up. I think everybody is realizing that things have to change. And to your point, yes, it has to come from the top. You can't blame the data providers. You can't even blame these intermediaries, really, because they're just doing what they're asked to do. Okay. The other words you said, though, were enforce standards, which is quite interesting. I really do believe, like, I was in Nielsen. I came into Nielsen as a skeptic of their business. Like,
Yeah.
how are you making all this money off this panel? What the hell? And then I slowly did a 180 and realized how important independent measurement is, and independent governance. And these
Yeah.
things kind of go together. And what this new world needs, we talked about this at the beginning of the pod here, really, this new world, this new messy, crazy, heavily obfuscated, very valuable world of CTV and addressable television, it needs independent bodies, whether it's governing bodies like a new version of the MRC,
Yeah.
or another Nielsen that maybe doesn't have operates differently. It can't be Nielsen, because that would mean they have to change their economic model, because that will just not work. Maybe it would, I don't know, but we need independent. It's like when you drive your car up to a gas pump to fill it up. If there's no octane rating on that pump, a sticker, you're not going to put gas in your car, because it might be watered down, because that week the owner wanted to buy a boat and he watered down all his gas for, like, what that octane rating does is it gives the consumer confidence that an independent entity has said this gas is not going to break your car, and it's going to give you choice about what grade of gas you want to buy depending on your use case, a BMW or a rental car. So that same thing needs to exist in this new data ecosystem, where buyers and sellers can agree, if I'm going to buy a identity for Brett House at gmail.com, I need confidence that he's actually male, he's actually married or not, he actually has a cat, all these different things about him. So there needs to be some independent entity that helps bring trust into this data-driven ecosystem, much like Nielsen brought trust into the linear television market.
I think that's a great way to end it. Trust has
is.
carried through this entire episode. And Scott, hey, thanks for the time. It was awesome to connect.
It was a great
deeply.
conversation.
I'm
This is
glad we
super
could
fun.
do this versus a 20-minute at possible, because it allows you just to really unpack a lot of these pretty heady topics.
Yeah.
This was a ton of fun, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Really fun.
And everybody that made it this far, www.signalandnoise.ai, and you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, as well as our newsletter, which is going far and wide now. And we will see you next time.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.